Okay, sorry about that. I was having some technical difficulties. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope you are having a lovely evening. So as everyone comes in, I just wanted to introduce myself and introduce GCAPP and our panelists. So my name is Leah, and I am one of our training and technical assistance coordinators at GCAPP. Actually, first I want to make sure, can you all hear me, panelists? Awesome, good. Okay, just double checking. So my name is Leah. I work at GCAPP, the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential. At GCAPP, we work with hundreds of youth, schools, youth serving professionals, and parents all across the state of Georgia. And we work to ensure that young people have information, knowledge, and motivation to ensure that they have a healthy lifestyle. So we work with schools and youth to discuss comprehensive sex education, youth empowerment, parent engagement. And so we're really excited to have you here on our webinar, our two-part series. Today is our part one, where we're talking about what every parent needs to know about supporting your LGBTQ plus youth. So we have 4 panelists today. 2 of our panelists are part of our Youth Advisory Council, what we also call YAC. And this is when we work with youth ages 14 through 24 to be a part of a really awesome program to work on youth action plans to make a difference in their community. So we have Morgan Cosby. She is a senior at Arabia Mountain High School in DeKalb County. After high school, she plans on studying to become an adolescent clinical psychologist, specializing in people of color and LGBTQ plus youth. And in her free time, she enjoys thrifting, reading, working out, baking, and watching new shows. We also have Ansley Cooper. She has been a GCAPP YAC member since 2021. She's also a student in Gwinnett County Public Schools and a leader both within and outside of her community. As a bisexual teenage girl, she hopes to serve as a support system to anyone who needs it. And she's really happy to be here. We also have Heather Cooper, who is a parent and a parent of Ansley. She is a veteran educator of 21 years, a high school behavior intervention specialist, and a proud and supportive queer mom. She has a PhD in adult learning and development and is the author of the book, The Teacher's Closet. And last but definitely not least, we have Elise Schuster, who is here with us helping to put on this amazing webinar. They are a sexuality educator and a youth development professional. They have a master's in public health and are the co-founder of OK So, a free app that connects young people with questions about identity, relationships, sexual health, and more to experts who provide personalized support and information. So thank you, panelists, for being here. So before we get started, I hope everyone can see the chat. And if you can write in the chat one thing that you would like to learn today, I would love to see some of that. So just kind of while we're getting started, especially after you've learned about, oh, is the chat disabled? Oh, you know what? It very well could be disabled. And that is a big bummer that it is. Well, think about them in your head, and I hope that you are going to learn one of those things that you've thought about. And hopefully, yeah, I'm sorry the chat's disabled. That was silly me. So before we get started, I also want to talk about some group agreements. I love having some good, juicy group agreements when we are working, in a space together, even though we aren't able to really hear you or talk to you. I just want to remind everyone that this is a safe space. We want to respect everyone and their identities. We want to listen actively, avoid making any assumptions or stereotypes. And then this isn't really a group agreement, but if you can, put all of the questions that you have in the Q&A box. So there's a Q&A box. Oh, well, you can't put anything in the chat. So that ends that one. So again, just remembering that this is a safe space and we're here to listen and learn and be here together. So I'm going to start by asking a question to all of our panelists. And panelists, as you want to answer them, just feel free to come off mute and you can answer them. So my first question is, imagine a parent whose child just came out to them and they're feeling overwhelmed. What should they do? Whoever wants to start is welcome.
I'd like to start, actually. I would say the biggest thing to do in this situation is to just listen and try to understand it, not to try to make assumptions. Because assumptions, not only will they hurt you in the long run, but they'll hurt your child too.
Thank you, Morgan. Anybody
As
else?
always, a responsibility as a parent is just to be.
You went off mute, Heather.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
But be a supportive listener, and you don't have to find understanding right away. It's something that you're growing to learn. Everyone has their own identity. Everyone has their own beliefs and how they feel, and you don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah. Ansley or Elise?
I would say to just tell them that you love them and just to always be there. And you may not know what the next step is, just assuring that your child is loved for and that they know that you care for them can do so much.
I think that, I mean, I have very, very little to add to that, but just to say to breathe, just remember to breathe. And just to remember that sort of just like any other situation with our kids, that it's about, you know, what do they need in that moment, and trying to think about, you know, we might be having our own internal journey that we're going on, but also trying to remember, just like folks were saying, right? What am I getting from my kid in this moment? Do they need love and acceptance? Do they need to know I'm listening? And just really try to sort of focus in on, like, they've come to you with this big thing that they're sharing, and there's something that they need you to do kind of in that moment.
Yes, I love that. All of your answers are so perfect. I love those. Thank you. Another question for everybody. What advice do you have for parents who feel like they aren't sure how to support that LGBTQ young person?
For this question, I'd like for this, the advice is evaluate why you feel like you can't support them, whether it be, hey, I've grown up in the church and I've just been my whole life been telling me that these people are going to hell, these people are yada yada yada, or whether it be your parents who you may have observed through your whole life, you know, pointing and sneering at LGBT people, or if it comes from a personal place where you may have been hurt by a person that just happened to be LGBTQ people, and you've formed negative connotations surrounding LGBTQ people. Because once you analyze that, then you have to look at your child and be like, am I pushing what I've learned and observed in my life on my child, when in reality your child is not like what you experience? And you have to look at them before you cast judgment.
I would also say, you know, I think especially when we think about like people who sort of maybe want to be supportive but aren't sure how to be supportive, we know from really solid research that having one supportive family member in a young person's life who affirms who they are decreases an LGBTQ young person's risk of suicide by half. Like, it is the single most important thing that we can do, is really not deny who our kids are, but let them know that we see them. We, you know, sort of see them for who they truly are.
And coming from both a parent perspective and from a teacher perspective, things are so unknown in education right now, and how are teachers supporting the community. So it's really important that support and listening ear is available. And regardless, retrospectively, yes, you can think about the background that you've grown up with and your experiences that you've grown up with, but your main responsibility as a parent is to love and to create that safe space.
I think
Yeah.
one other, oh, sorry.
No, go on. I was just gonna say
No, I was just going to say, I think that another thing that I often find myself talking with parents about is this idea that sometimes as parents, our role can be sort of almost like a coaching role. And sometimes our kids really need us to be their champions. And it can be really hard as a parent to kind of know which role we're supposed to be at in that moment. So when we're thinking about supporting LGBTQ young people, all of our kids, whether they're LGBTQ or not, are going to face things in their lives that are going to be difficult. And we're not going to be able to fix every single thing, right? We're not going to be able to stop things that are happening to them, but we can give them tools that can help them navigate the world. We can provide encouragement. We can give them opportunities to reflect. We can ask questions. And that, just like a coach might help someone see, things in a different way. And then sometimes our kids need us to be their champions. Like they really need us to be an advocate and an ally for them. So that might mean talking to a teacher or an after-school program or a grandparent. And so there are times when sort of a parent can use their status as the parent to kind of help a young person navigate a situation. I think it can be helpful sort of when you're thinking about what are the different ways that I can support someone, to kind of, as a parent, kind of ask that question of like, do they need me to like come in and really, be that champion in this moment? Or is my role to maybe take a step back and be a bit more of a coach and help them develop some of the skills that they're going to need for the rest of their lives to navigate all of the things in the world?
I'd like to go back off of what they just said, because sometimes I've noticed that parents can, I don't know how to say this in a polite way, do too much. Essentially, this means once the child comes out, they feel like they have to be, the parent feels like they have to be LGBTQ friendly all the time. Just, I saw this gay display at Route 21 doing Pride Month. Oh, I got this for you, yada, yada, yada. But for me, when I personally came out to my parents, I knew since a young age. So basically, the whole time my parents have known me, like in my adolescence, I knew I was a queer individual. So for me, nothing really had to change because I was acting accordingly my whole life. The only difference is my parents didn't know. So for me to go all of a sudden acting normal, then for my mom specifically to just be like, it was kind of like a mind-blowing experience. And so it would be honest, like they said, to just sit down and have a conversation to prevent that, because that can also cause a severe disconnect and avoidance that your child will avoid you for doing too much when they just want to live in their truth.
That's a really good point that you've just made. Coming from my standpoint, it's a little bit different being gay myself. It's no different for me, right? It's just like the standard coming out business. It's like straight people or whatever don't come out every day, but LGBTQ plus, we are constantly, people feel like we have to have those conversations. So I think you make a very valid point that the way that your parent treats you, even though it may change, that's just the way that your parent is processing and reflecting and learning with you. But I think that was a really valid point.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like you'll have some really great advice for parents who are on all parts of the spectrum, parents who are super supportive, parents who are figuring out how to support, how do I feel about this? So speaking of that, what kind of advice would you give to a parent who, they're very new to even learning about LGBTQ plus identities? Maybe they never really met anybody who openly identified as LGBTQ. How do they respond to their teen? How do they show up for their teen if this feels maybe scary for them?
I didn't want to hog the airtime, so I was giving appropriate wait time. Again, I would just highly encourage that wait time for themselves and give themselves grace, allow themselves to feel like they have to reflect on things and to find resources. You know, you talked about being a coach, right? It's the same thing. If you don't know, go find somebody who does. And think about the different resources that are available to our teens. And a lot of teens are using social media platforms to learn things. So it's time to educate and be kind, but give yourself grace. Again, you don't have to have all the answers. And there's no right or wrong with this learning process, as long as you're open and kind to your teen.
I would say, to answer this question, I would say cast away all expectations and stereotypes that you may have ingrained in your mind about what a certain LGBTQ identity has to be. Because oftentimes that identity has been portrayed so dramatic in a way in the media, in the social media, in all forms, that honestly, that may not even be what's true to your teen. And like you just have to ask your teen, because some teens, they may have a very specific identity. Or like for me, I have a more looser identity where most of the times I don't, when I introduce myself, when I walk into a room, my queerness is not the first thing I introduce. I don't, like, it's not like I'm not out, but for me, that's not the thing that shines out or defines me as my sexuality. But whereas other people, may have not had that community for so long that every time they introduce themselves, that may be their first thing that they introduce about themselves, so that they can get that sense of community and just get it out there, so that they, can continue living the way that they want, and having to be like, hey, I told you this up front and now, so if you're my friend, if you're somebody close to me, you already knew this from the beginning. I don't have to worry about you finding out and then, switching up on me. So basically just ask their teen. And that's for all these questions, just ask your teen. And I know that can be a very tough conversation, even if your teen is crying or whatnot, because I know I certainly was. You just have to ask, because that information has to come out. It will provide both of you with a greater understanding of where the teen's coming from and where the parent's coming from.
I would also add, I think, as folks have said, like, this is such a journey to be on. And I think thinking of it as a journey can be really helpful. I think we often think about, we can kind of create metaphors where like there is a destination, like we're going to get to some point where we've got it all figured out, instead of really thinking about it as like a road that we're traveling, that we may not know exactly where it's going to lead, and that is okay. And there really are so many resources out there, and there are all different kinds of resources too, which I think is, something that's really helpful to think about. So, there are podcasts and books and articles and YouTube videos and support groups, and, there's all sorts of different things. And so I think a piece of it too is feeling like when you're on your journey and you're learning and you're, figuring out all of, you're processing and all of the things, what is the way that you want to engage with information? Because there's a pretty good chance that that's out there in some form for you. And so, just thinking about sort of, are you going to buy a book, but then you're never going to read it because you've got things going on and books aren't workable, but there are podcasts, and maybe you could listen to a podcast, right, while you're driving to work or something. So how can you make kind of accessing the information a part of your life in the way that works for you?
Yeah, and I also wanted to add that I think I've heard that sometimes people have kind of relate queerness or sexual orientation with like just sex. So thinking, oh, well, I don't want my son having sex with a man. But to remember that it's not just about sex, it's about love. And for some people, it might not be about sex at all, but it's about love. And we want to support our teens to love who they truly love and who makes them feel good. So that's just something I wanted to add. Okay, so I do have two or some other questions now specifically for Ansley and Morgan. So this one's for Ansley and Morgan. You can answer, whoever can go first. The first question is, as LGBTQ plus youth, what do you feel are the top 2 to 3 things? I guess you kind of answered this already, but we'll talk about it again. The top 2 to 3 things parents can do to best love, respect, and be that ally to their youth.
I think when a child may come out to their parent is to not like, I feel like it's to keep your composure as a parent. You know, if you do something radical or do something that they're not used to, it might scare your child or just think that they're unwanted when you're just really in shock. And, you know, as the adult, you're supposed to keep your composure and just be there. So it's more of like, you know, and deep inside, you might feel like, oh, this is new to me. I'm not used to this. Just tell them like, it's going to be okay. Like, can you tell me more about how you feel this way or what happened? Or, you know, just something. You might not be asking the right questions, but you're asking questions and you're trying to understand, which helps. And it shows that you're interested in learning and you're interested in making sure that your child is safe and that they're not unwanted, that they're wanted by us and you love them as they are. And so I think it's more of like just showing that you care and you're supportive, regardless of your true feelings or your beliefs that you may think. Just that first step into growing.
Okay, to answer this question, I would say just like going back off of what Ansley just said, just to be there and to regain your composure, because oftentimes people respond to things in anger without knowing the true story, without knowing the full story of what your child may have been going through, like through all of their life, through recent times, just to get to this point where they felt comfortable enough to share this with you. Because coming out is not a given. Not everybody comes out in their life. So for your child to feel safe enough, to feel proud enough, to feel loved enough to come out, that in itself is a huge feat. For me, I knew around 6 that I was a part of the queer community. But I'm a senior in high school and I didn't come out to my junior year. So the fact that I finally felt loved, that was a privilege to my parents. So just to make sure that you continuously make your kid feel loved, support it. And that's all I can really say addressing that question.
Thank you. So, so we know that, you know, Ansley's mom is here. Ansley's mom, Heather, she is also identified as LGBTQ, and so does Ansley. So we know that for Ansley, it didn't seem, you know, like a scary thing to come out, I imagine, because you're like, well, my mom's gay too. But for you, Morgan, you said that you knew since you were young, but it took you a while to come out to your parents. So what was it like for you to maybe worry that they wouldn't be supportive?
Okay, so growing up, first off, I knew for a fact my dad wasn't going to be supportive. In fact, to this day, my dad has a smidge of supportiveness in him. But for a little background, of course, I am I'm a Black woman. I identify as a Black woman. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, and both my dad's family and my mom's family. My mom's family is from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Very, very religious, strict Methodist community in North Carolina. My dad's family is from Morgan County, Georgia, very, very country part of Georgia. So I already knew going in that both my parents were very religious. But I knew with the country element with my dad, not saying all country people lean towards that negative way of thought, but for my dad, I know even to this day, he supports me because I'm his daughter. If I was not his daughter, he would not be supported. Even to this day, he still slips up with sly comments and all that kind of stuff. So for me, I just felt that I reached a point in where it would have been a huge detriment to my physical and mental health if I hadn't come out. If I hadn't come out in that moment, in that specific day, I don't know if I would be here today. So it wasn't really worrying about if my parents were going to be supportive, because I knew they weren't. It was for myself. It wasn't really for them. So that's that. So to answer that question in a roundabout way, a lot of the times it's a blessing. It's a blessing if your parents are supportive. It's a huge blessing, something to be very grateful for, because that mental turmoil that you have to go through, knowing that your parents won't be supportive, and especially if you still have to live with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and you also raise a good point too, Morgan, that I don't have the exact data right now, but I do know that LGBTQ plus youth are more likely to, one, be bullied at school, also to experience more mental health issues, and more likely to want to or attempt to commit suicide. So the importance of supporting our teen, whether or not we believe that a young person knows they are gay or LGBTQ, is really important, because we want our youth to be happy and healthy and to be here and alive, right? So really important thing I just wanted to throw out there. Ansley, so what was it for you? I mean, we knew that you knew that your mom was LGBTQ. I don't know if you knew your whole life, actually. I don't know if I knew that. And so what made you, other than that, make you feel like you felt supported as an LGBTQ person?
I think growing up with my mom, it's more of like I'm used to that lifestyle. So for me, so let's say I went to a sleepover and it was a straight family, it's a different, like, I see it's different for me, because it's not, I didn't grow up in a mom and dad household. I grew up in a single parent mom, and then my other mom came in 5th grade. So I grew up in a 2-mom household for half my life. So I kind of just was used to being in a 2-mom household. But it's more of like, I knew my grandma, she wasn't as supportive as my mother was. So it's kind of like I knew the context of how my mother grew up. And so my mom taught herself that she wouldn't make her child feel unwanted if they came out. And I knew from like a day, like when I was from the first time I can remember, my mom is always going to be supportive of me no matter what. And whether that be in school or who I love or what I do piercing wise, she's always going to be supportive. And I felt like I just came out recently. I just figured out this is who I am. And, even though I grew up in the household, I didn't know straight away that I was LGBTQ plus. I just figured it out. So it's kind of like, it's not going to happen once your child comes straight away. It's not going to happen at a specific time. It's when your child thinks they're ready and that they think that I'm going to be supported, then I will be. But my mom when I came out, it was a very casual thing. My now girlfriend just came over to my house and she left. And so my parents were like questioning her. They were like, "Are you with her?" Like questioning me about it. And it was a very comfortable thing. And I'm grateful that it was comfortable, because it made everything so much easier. And it was kind of like a brush off the back, which I'm very thankful that I am in a family that supports me. And it's not something that is odd in our family. It's something that's normal, and it should be normal. I think it should be normalized, like heterosexual couples. So I think just her being her. I mean, my mom is awesome. So
Cute. Okay, thanks, Ansley and Morgan. So now I'm going to bring it to Heather. So for you as a parent, how do you support your LGBTQ teen?
Well, like Ainsley was saying, it's, it's no different for me. I have a heterosexual son, and I treat them all the same. I mean, for me, it is true. For me personally, I take what happened to me growing up and my self-identity, that I struggled because of the way that my family grew up and the beliefs that my own parents had, mainly my mother. And so I did vow that I would never, when you have parents, you retrospectively think like, well, when I'm a parent, I'm going to do this differently. And that's one thing that I always said I would do, is I would always be open and willing to let them lead the way. I feel very strongly that that's how people learn, and especially teenagers, is to allow them the opportunity to make decisions on their own and be there to help guide and coach them in reflecting on their decisions that they've made. And I'm so thankful that Ainsley trusted me in that position, because again, sadly, you don't come out once. You're constantly, it's over a lifetime, because the assumption is that it's that heterosexual privilege that everyone has, right? And so the assumption is that people around us are straight, and for the most part, it doesn't matter, right? But when you're protecting your child, you need to be the advocate, and that's my role for her, is to love, to support, to encourage, to educate, and be her biggest cheerleader. And that means surrounding her with people who support her and educating those who don't. I don't necessarily avoid people, if you will, that don't necessarily support, but I do find myself educating them in a roundabout way, because at the end of the day, love is love. I really believe that. It sounds so cliche, but it's true. It doesn't bother me who you love, and it shouldn't bother you who my daughter loves. And so I think as a parent, always having that safe space, always being, I get the opportunity to be the cool parent. I don't know why, but apparently being gay is super cool. But no, I just, being down to earth and open, and she will tell you, I'm still strict. I still have the same rules and the same kind of ideologies as other parents. It's not like I just let her go and do her thing. But the most important thing is development of who you are and what you are inside authentically.
Can I cut in? Okay. Yeah, I like to point out what my mom said about a lot of people, when I tell them I have 2 moms, they're always like, "Oh, I bet that's so cool. You're like, you can do whatever you want," and kind of thing. And I'm like, actually, I have a mom that is on my butt about everything in a good way, because I am a good student. But I feel like that's a stereotype that they're not a parent, they're just a friend, and that's not true at all. I mean, my mom is a parent, and she's a good one at that one. And it doesn't just because she might have this identity for herself, that doesn't affect how she parents, or how she's going to parent my brother, or how she's going to parent my sister. It's what parents do. They're going to parent, and it's regardless of your sexuality.
Thank you. Yes, everything you both said. I have another question for you, Heather. So I know that a lot of LGBTQ plus youth, whose parents aren't supportive, sometimes their parents might kick them out of the house, or say either you can choose to be LGBTQ, or you can live with me, so you choose. Do you feel, as a parent who's supportive of your teen and as a parent who is LGBTQ, that you are willing to be a safe haven for those youth who need, obviously not just random person on the street, but do you feel that you would be that for any of Ansley's friends, and or how important is it to have a parent in the community that's willing to be there for teens who need it? I know that's a long-winded question.
It is fully loaded too. Like I said, or like you, when you introduced me, I have been an educator for 21 years. Most of my education experience teaching has been in Georgia. I'm not from Georgia, I'm from Minnesota, and things are landslides different from northern Minnesota to Georgia. Being in education, it's heartbreaking because it feels like people are tiptoeing around the subject. And I know someone earlier said that LGBTQ plus children, their risk of dying by suicide is just enormous because there's that lack of support. We focus on the social emotional learning of students, but we're missing a huge gap with self-identity. It is so important that teenagers, all children, not just teenagers, that all children have an outlet, that they have an ally, they have somebody that they can turn to have conversations with and to learn from. I remember it wasn't too long ago that I actually came out to my students. It was inadvertently came out to my students. I never have had the conversation. I was very careful about my pronoun use. I just was very careful because I used to teach in middle school. And then I came to the high school level and I had just gotten engaged, and one of my students had asked me, what's his name? And I said, her name is, and I filled in the blank, and nothing happened. I was shocked. I was expecting something to happen. But what did happen was LGBTQ plus students were coming out of the woodwork to come talk to me, because now they had somebody in their corner. And now it was just a magical thing for them to have somebody to listen and to be a helpful resource. And the one thing that I would say to parents as well is that this is not a promotion. If you are gay, we are not promoting children to be gay. If you talk about homosexuality, that doesn't mean your child is going to be homosexual. It's sad that is an old belief. There's an old belief that anybody that doesn't identify as straight is, into pedophilia. That's not true either. It's just these old stigmas that are attached, and people are afraid to learn and open up to new things. And so with that, yes, I will be 100% supportive. My room is a safe space. I try to advocate as much as I possibly can for my high school. We have small little groups in my high school that kids feel safe to go to. But I think the one thing that is most rewarding for me, being an educator and being surrounded by teenagers, not only through my children's friends, is just for other teenagers to see, wow, they can be successful. Because again, there's that stigma, like Ainsley was saying about being a parent. Oh, they must, they must let you do whatever you want. It's not that way. It's not that.
Yes, thank you. And you made me think about a good point of when we're talking about being LGBTQ and hosting this webinar, or coming out to people, it's not to promote being gay as a lifestyle. It is, like you said, to say this is who I am, and to show that people, like you said, people can be successful and be LGBTQ. And coming out to our students, our youth, people that we work with, can also help people to feel like, I have a safe person to talk to. And I actually had my cousin had a family reunion last week, and my younger cousin came out to me, and then when I told her, oh, I'm queer too, then she started asking me all these questions, and I feel like she felt so happy to see somebody in her family that she could ask questions to about how did my parents take it and things like that. So I feel like just seeing that felt so good to see my cousin now feel comfortable being able to talk about this. So anyway, some last questions I have, and then we'll answer some of these questions from our chat box, are for Elise. So you co-founded this lovely app that we love, Okay So, and you've talked to thousands of LGBTQ+ youth on this app. What are some things that young people talk to you about when they're wanting their parents to be more supportive?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I think it comes back to some of the things, I mean, I think, things that we've been really talking about all night. But I think, there are so many of these kind of older stigmas that are still attached to the ideas around coming out, around what it means to be part of the LGBTQ community. One that I was thinking about earlier too was the idea that it's a choice or a decision that people are making, and sort of this worry that, if we talk about it, that will make people want to choose it, when in fact what's happening is that people can live a life of like pain and not understanding and having to hide, or can live a life of sort of who they really are. And I think often when I'm talking with young people on Okay So, far and away the biggest thing that they're worried about is that their parents are going to stop loving them. That's it, right? And it really is like, I want to tell my parents who I really am, and I am terrified that when they find out who I am, who I know myself to be, that they won't love me anymore. And I think that, they worry that people are going to tell them that they're making it up, or that it's just a phase, or that they're doing it, to get attention, or because they think it's cool. And all of the young people that we talk to are not in that place at all. They are on their own journey of figuring out who they authentically are, and they don't want to have to hide that. And they don't want to have to hide it from their friends or their parents. And they want to be able to live as who they really are. And they are absolutely terrified of what their parents are going to do. And I've been there myself, so I know that feeling as well. And I think even young people whose parents might be, I think some people definitely have parents who have said or done things that kind of let them know that they're not supportive, right? There are lots of ways that people can show that by their behavior. And there are people who, we talk to young people whose parents, who they're sort of like, I think they might be, right? I think they might be supportive. But I think that unless a parent has really actually made it a point to say, no matter who you are, no matter what your identity is, no matter who you are, romantically interested in, I love you, right? Like, I will always love you. Like, as I think it's such a helpful thing for parents to think about, really making sure that they're saying that to their kids as young as they can, almost, right? And finding ways to signal if you are okay with it, that you are okay with it. Because I think we sort of assume like, oh, my kids know that I love them, when often kids are like, yeah, but this though, right? But what happens if I do this? So really just trying to be as openly supportive as possible before. Like, don't assume that your kid is straight, right? Don't assume, right? Try to sort of undo some of those pieces and create some openness in any place that you can as you're talking with your children, so that if at some point they want to come out to you, they already know that it's that safe, supportive space.
Thank you, Elise. You might have already answered this question, and I guess you probably did, but I'm going to ask it again just so you can reiterate. What is the number one most people think people are worried about?
Yeah, I mean, the number one thing that people are most worried about is the rejection, right? The rejection of their family. That is far and away. I think, definitely sort of coming out is kind of probably the biggest thing that we talk about. I think the other biggest thing that we talk with young people about a lot is like, how do I know if I'm this, right? Like, how do I know for sure that this is how I'm feeling? Which I think really speaks to both the fact that, again, this is a journey, right? And that we aren't always going to have every answer all the time, that we're all learning and growing and discovering things about ourselves, not just about identity, but about, not just about this identity, right? But about all sorts of things that I'm sure if any of us pause for a second, you might think like, oh, when I was younger, I thought I liked this. And I've realized, right? Like, I lived in New York City for many years. I never tried an egg and cheese sandwich because I thought I wouldn't like it. Why? They're amazing, delicious. What was I doing for so long, right? And now I look back on that and I'm like, well, okay, that's my egg and cheese journey, right? Like, I've learned something about myself. So there's so many things in our lives. I think we take this and we like separate it. We put it into this other category when really it's just like so many parts of our lives. If our kid was super into basketball and we knew nothing about it, probably within some span of time, right, we would know what an alley-oop was, and we would know what the forward did on the team, and we would learn because it was important to our kid. And we can do that too, with all of these topics as well. I think it's really just about understanding that we are on our journey, kids are on their journey, and that we're all sort of figuring it out. And I think we live in a world that does sort of give us messages like, you have to know who you are and you have to have all the answers. So it's really important for all of us to remember that we don't have to know exactly what's going on and we don't have to have all the answers.
Yes, so many good points. And I've never really thought of the analogy of if your child wanted to play basketball and you didn't know anything about basketball, you would learn it, right? Or if you didn't, like, I don't like sports, I don't care about sports, but if I have kids one day and they want to play football, honestly, I do not like football. It is so boring, but I would support my child to play football. I would go to their games. I would learn about it. So yeah, it's kind of like as simple as that. Loving your child for what they love. I love that my child might love football one day, even though I don't love it. I love that for them. So great analogy. So you all have had some really great discussions, great information. I feel like I've learned a lot today. So we have about a little over 30 minutes. So in this time, I want to look at some of these questions that our lovely attendees have asked. So I'm going to go through these, and some of them I'll answer because I can, but most of them, they will go to you all. So let's see. Okay, some of them are answered. Again, I'm so sorry about the chat being disabled. That was such a silly thing, but if you come back for part 2, we will try to figure out the chat for the next time. And that's going to be next Monday, same time, same place. So Sherlonda says, I'd like to learn more about how to support my foster children if they open up to me and tell me that they're lesbian, gay, or bi, LGBTQ+. So it seems like they would like, to learn how do they support their foster children. If any of you all want to answer that.
I think that's the same thing. I feel like we've been, the common thread that's held this evening together is that safe, open communication. Hopefully that space with foster children or any type of children, really. I mean, let's be honest, you just have to create that welcoming environment so that they feel safe to answer, to ask questions. And to kind of go off what Morgan said earlier is to allow them to lead the way. Don't probe. Ask questions that will require that open dialogue, but allow them to be in the driver's seat when it comes to when and how much information they want to share. And I think body language and that response is really important to feeling accepted and safe.
I would also just add that, two things I think that maybe are particular to young people who are in foster care, which is that there has been potentially, right, some kind of trauma in their history, which isn't to say that other kids haven't also experienced that, or that they're, but being taken from your family is in of itself, a trauma. And so that we know that young people who've experienced trauma, that it can impact, how they are processing the world. And so I'm not trying to say by that they maybe are not actually part of the LGBTQ community, but just understanding that there may be even more fear there, more fear of rejection, more fear of what you might say as the foster parent, more fear of the agency that they're, affiliated with finding out. There's sort of a whole extra layer of fear there, I think, for young people who are in the foster care system. So, and then I think the idea that, that kind of rejection then means moving to another family, like there's just a whole sort of extra layer. So again, I think the more that you can do to really create and kind of articulate and verbalize that you're a safe and supportive space for all, any young person who's with you, that is what's going to help like really create that environment for that person.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, we got some more questions. This person, Melissa, asks, I would like to know how to teach our children to advocate for themselves as they continue to grow and when mom and dad aren't around. Great question.
I would have to say, because I've had once my parents came around-ish, I've had similar chats with them on how to like stay motivated and not let myself be defined by my sexuality, though it is an important factor in my life. So basically, my parents, my dad specifically, he had a chat with me, and he just had, basically the chat was about all the things that I'm good at, all the things that define me outside of my sexuality and that make me me. And that, honestly, that just gave me really a confidence boost, because it helped me see that I can't, I'm already this, I can't use that word. I'm already this like strong and empowered person. So just adding my sexuality on it makes me an even more strong and empowered person. So maybe, I don't want to say ego booster conversations, but at the same time, conversations that just make them realize their sexuality is not a downfall. Their sexuality is not a downfall. It's not a detriment of their personality. It's an added strength. It's an added layer of empathy. You can now understand more people. You can understand where other people are coming from. So just use that as a motivator, so that they can see and it can, make them feel genuinely strong inside.
Awesome. Thank you.
I love that. I would also just add, I had another idea. Let me see if I can remember what it was. I feel like there's maybe two other things that I would think about. One is, helping, and I think this is a skill, let's be real, that all of us are working on, which is trying in those moments when we might need to advocate for ourselves as well, right? Trying to understand sort of what's behind what's happening. So, someone else is saying something cruel. Is that about who we are? No, right? That's about who they are. That's about how they grew up, or the pain that they feel, themselves, or, you know, not knowing what to do with their feelings and lashing out and hurting someone else. And so sort of how do we separate ourselves from whatever might be happening and not see it, not take it personally? Can feel very personal because really it's that other person sort of showing us who they are. There's someone that I love whose name is Alok, and I can make sure that their Instagram handle goes into the chat, but they do a really, I think, phenomenal job of responding to people who say really sort of hurtful things to them on their Instagram, and really showing what it can look like to respond from a place of sort of compassion for the kind of life experience and pain that creates someone who is so willing to be so hateful. Right? And so it's sort of, I think, just exploring sort of different ways of responding and kind of creating that separation. And I think the other thing is remembering that everyone is going to, like, what advocacy might look like and sort of how someone might want to respond is going to look different for everyone. So there are some people who are like, I am right here with a witty comeback and I'm in your face and that's who I am. And other people don't want to do that. Other people want to keep it moving, and kind of everything in between. And so helping your kid figure out what feels right for them, and knowing that that can change from moment to moment, that it's okay to have times when you're keeping it moving, and there are other times when you might want to, you know, when advocacy might look different. And that first and foremost, we need to protect ourselves, right? And we need to kind of protect our hearts and feelings and figure out what does that look like for us.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so now I just fixed the chat. That was so silly. But now I know how to work it. So yeah, I would love to see that person's handle, Elise, that you were discussing. Some other questions, a really great one from an anonymous attendee. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about this one next Monday, so stay tuned. Anonymous attendee asks or says, there are so many policies and laws occurring that are affecting LGBTQ plus youth, young people. What recommendations could you provide to further advocate for support and guidance for young people at schools? Specifically, what can parents do? So that was a long one.
Go to the Board of Education, speak. I cannot stress that enough, that we're only getting one side that is vocal, and especially in the district that I'm in. And I really, as a parent, I wish that everyone would be able to be supportive and come out and speak about it to their Board of Education, and get other people, at least here, just to be open.
I'd like to also mention with all the things that are happening, like in Florida with all those bills that are being passed, is just speak to the Board of Education, but also protest, and then also talk to your child about it, and then the child will talk to their friends, and then friends will talk to their friends. And so it's more of some people don't know and some people do. So it's who watches the media, who really keeps up with the news, because a lot of people have lost faith in politicians and politics, and they have really just lost the fight, that they don't think their voice matters, when in reality it does, even though you might not look like it does. But just advocating for yourself, and then just being in front of those parents that are counter arguing what you're thinking is kind of like a parent to parent conversation, because a lot of these parents think it's only parent to child, and just to have a parent that supports and a parent that might not support, to have that conversation might be a very equal ground than a child and a parent. So maybe being your child's advocate is just so important.
Yes, thank you.
One thing that I talk to as well is, I really encourage my students to always keep in mind is that we're not responsible for how people act and what they say, but we're responsible for how we respond to it. And also, sometimes the things that are being said around us are learned behaviors. It's one of those things that the saying that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Education, informing, can change mindsets, can open hearts, can soften things. And again, instead of it always being a right and a wrong, just be in that space and allow it.
Yeah, thank you. So another question someone asks is, they feel they have a child who might claim to be gay to receive attention or to be manipulative. How would you handle this? Or how should a parent handle this? How would they know if the child's doing it to receive attention or be manipulative, or actually are feeling this way?
That was the question I was going to ask. Like, how do you know that that's not really what they're feeling? And, just the realization that self-identity can be a really hard, scary thing to go through, the journey, right? But I would caution you to keep an open mind and to not set that concrete wall in front of you and by assuming that they're feeling that way, because you really don't know what they're feeling. I'm not really sure that was a very articulate answer, but again, it kind of go around to being like, well, how, your child, I guess, at the end of the day, but I would caution the response of that.
I want to answer this question as well, because as a child who has had this question asked so many times by different adults, whether it be family, teachers, random people that I don't know, asking, don't assume, because being gay or being LGBT is not something that's a trend. It's not trendy. It's still very destigmatized. And as an LGBTQ person in Georgia, in like the metro area, whatever, I've had to deal with those questions, those little sly jokes, those little things, those little fetishy comments from people that I think are my friends and people that I've assumed are my friends. So I don't know about me, but I don't like personally hurting myself and having to put myself through mental torture. So you just have to think and sit back and realize, because nobody really wants to willingly put themselves through all the trouble, all the feedback that comes with being a part of the LGBT community. So if they're saying that you don't have to, you can have your own mindset, because everybody does have their own mindset and beliefs. But it is important to think, why do you think that why do you assume that they're faking it? Is it because maybe that they don't fit within your stereotype of what a queer person should be? Like with me, maybe I don't fit into people's stereotype of what a queer person should be. I would say I'm straight passing. I'm a Christian. I'm a very motivated student. I don't dress in loud colors. I don't dress with the pansexual flag or the rainbow flag, but I'm still very much a part of the community. And I'm more than just my appearance, and your appearance and the way you act doesn't determine whether you're homosexual or you're heterosexual. Because a lot of people, that's why there's like Fem's mask, all that, because a lot of people there's no one streamlined version of being a homosexual, being LGBTQ. So instead of assuming, maybe like actually try to have that conversation. And I know that may seem like an aggressive point away, I'm not angry or anything. It's just I tend to talk louder when I'm passionate about something. So I hope that answered your question from like an adult way with Miss Cooper and from a youth perspective with me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Morgan and Heather. So kind of speaking of that, someone says they have a granddaughter who, when she was 11 years old, she said that she identifies as a lesbian. And she said initially, or this person said initially, they thought their 11-year-old was too young to know. But she said, or I don't know why I keep saying she, I don't know this town hall meeting is their name. They said, however, I was receptive and open-minded. Currently, she is 12 years old, almost 13 years old. My question is, how do I respond to others when they ask about her sexuality? I know that was kind of long. Should I say it again shorter?
No. Harsh enough, but why? Why is that a conversation? Why is that up for debate? Why is that a conversation? I mean, I don't know. I'm sensitive to that situation just because I live it every day and I'm in it and I've been in it. And it doesn't need to be a conversation. That let the child drive. It is not your place, even as the parent, to be talking about that unless your child wants you to talk about it, my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think exactly, which is like, if whatever your kid wants you to do as they get older, right, that might, as they like 12 is also to me like a very young age to be having conversations about who people are attracted to. But I feel like, as someone gets older, then talk to them about how they want you to be talking about it. But it's really their decision, right? It's her decision what she wants to do. And then as the adults in her life, you get to go along with that and respect that.
Yes, beautiful answers, always.
I think
Okay.
maybe
Oh,
Morgan was going to say something too.
I'm sorry.
I unmuted just slightly before.
The only thing I was gonna say is, quite frankly, it's none of their business. If your granddaughter, when it's her time to share it out with other people, she'll do it at her time. It's at her pace, not your pace. Just because you want to have something to respond to people, because people will gossip. People will gossip, people will talk, but it's none of their business. You don't have to dignify them with a response.
Or all you would do is, why don't you ask? Turn it back over to the child. If that, again, that's kind of a cringy question when I think about it, right? It just makes me kind of have bubbles inside, because it's their decision. It should be the person's decision, regardless of age, should be their decision.
Yeah, and that also kind of brings me back to do we ask people if they're hetero, or do we say, is your child heterosexual? Yeah, so just that. So on the other spectrum, how can we educate or inform our non-LGBTQ kids to be more accepting and better allies for their LGBTQ peers, their LGBTQ brothers and sisters? How can we help them?
I'm gonna say this from a high school student in Gwinnett County Public Schools. A lot of students, especially like teenagers, are always like, they use very like, they're not homophobic, but it's kind of a homophobic connotation, or it's negatively directed toward the LGBTQ plus community with, oh, that's gay, or you're acting gay, like it's a bad thing, or oh, you gonna kiss that boy now. So it's kind of like they're very negatively, like heterosexual people are very negative towards LGBTQ plus, and it's kind of like it's more of like you're gonna have that conversation, whether that be you as a child or a teenager in high school, which is high school. I mean, high school may have changed from generation to generation, but it's still students growing and they're still learning, and their brain has not fully developed yet. I mean, your brain doesn't fully develop until you're like 21. So it's more of like just making sure they're educated on how this may be harmful to some students, and how maybe that you're saying that in a not negative way, but students can take that in a negative way and then feel bad about themselves because it's kind of directed towards them. I mean, I have a friend and everybody thinks he's gay, but he's not. And he says that multiple times, I'm straight, just because I might like something, a certain thing, or I might do something doesn't change who I am or change my sexuality just because they act a certain way, because of the stereotype that all gay men have to act feminine, or have to dress feminine, or have this feminine type voice. It's just these stereotypes that are like constantly in school and throughout school. And so, oh, thank you for the 25. But for kids, I think school curriculum is a big thing. And I know a lot of schools have advisement, but a lot of the advisement time is spent students doing whatever they want. And I feel like it could be spent doing something more educational with LGBTQ plus, because a lot of schools are scared to tackle this. I mean, they're scared to touch this concept that being gay, being straight, being anything is such a touchy subject because of parents and because of your teen being a young age. In reality, I mean, your teen is about to enter adulthood after graduation, and you're getting pushed out into this real world, and they're not going to know how to act a certain way if they meet someone who's part of the LGBTQ plus. They don't know the first steps of respecting someone. So it's just having that information during those lessons that could help students, or having those teachers being able to rely on to have these conversations with, to educate these non-LGBTQ plus kids. So it's kind of like that situation. It's more of like the resources available, and for students to have those personal conversations with their friends or not their friends, and be like, hey, that's not nice, or like maybe not say that, maybe like choose something different. So yeah.
Since these questions, this particular question does relate more to me and Ansley, I would also like to answer it. I would say the biggest thing about teaching non-LGBTQ to students to respect people of the specific community is just to not believe everything they hear, not believe every stereotype and every Reddit post or whatnot that says something about an LGBTQ person, because a lot of these stereotypes can be very harmful. And even if these questions are coming out of genuine curiosity, they can be very, very harmful and hurtful to the person, especially if it's like a person they've known their whole life. Like in my experience, I faced more stigma about I'm gonna say slut shaming basically, because it was assumed once I came out as pan and queer that I was a cheater. I was going willy-nilly. I was doing this and that with everyone, and I was like, whoa, you know me my whole life, and then you're assuming this because of one new piece of information that you know. So it's just, please educate your kids on the harm of stereotypes. Because and then especially with the intersectionality, like me being a person of color, particularly a woman, a person of color, there's already stereotypes about promiscuity. Don't know how to pronounce that word, but going around. so that measured with that just made me feel really, really insecure about myself. And you never know how a person truly is inside. So for just spreading words and believing everything you hear, just ask. Like my friends ask me all the time, like, may I become their little queer expert? Don't force that onto your child to be a queer expert. But if they have a question, they'll come to me because they know I'll answer it without getting mad. So just ask. Have you teach your students to learn how to ask, but some things are on Google. And a lot of my queer friends, they'll tell you, hey, just look it up. Because just educate them to go to a lot of resources like Trevor Project, people like other resources will provide both you and your kid with plenty of information, true information, factual information backed up with statistics and all that.
I would also just add to that, I think that, you know, if you're watching this and you're a parent of younger kids, congratulations, because you get to start so much earlier. There are so many wonderful picture books. There are so many ways to have conversations. The other thing I think is, if you as a family, and I think many families do, have sort of a set of family values that you're living by, you know, if one of those values is kindness towards others, if one of those values is community, if one of those values is caring, right? How does that value show up here? And so I think, as you know, as a parent, it's also like, I'm the parent of a small child, but there are so many opportunities to have conversations where we can really normalize this and try to undo some of the stereotypes and try to, you know, catch our kids in the car saying something and have a conversation about it later, right? So there's so many sort of ways as parents that we can, you know, moments to sort of intervene. And if you have younger kids, really, you know, being able to start really early in terms of showing them how many different kinds of people there are in the world and how many different ways there are to live and to love. And that doesn't just mean LGBTQ folks, right? That there are people with disabilities and people from different countries and like there's a whole planet out here. So how can we show our kids that, you know, here are all of these different kinds of people and everyone's human, everyone deserves love and respect. And how can we, you know, bring that kind of, no matter who that person is, to all of our kids.
Yes, and I love this resource guide you put in the chat. I'm already looking over here at it like, ooh, I want to look at this book. I want to look at these videos. And one video that I think popped up said something about, it says kids meet a gender non-conforming person. I'm assuming that actually is saying what's happening in the video. And I've seen videos like this or talk to non-binary folks who say, so a kid came up to me and asked me, are you a boy or a girl? And they said, oh, well, I'm neither. And the kid was just like, okay, maybe they asked more questions. But most of the times kids are coming out of genuine curiosity and they're open-minded to learn whatever you have to tell them. And that's something I love about kids, because they're non-judgmental. They're here to listen and to learn about life. And I think that's great advice for adults to live that way, is just being open to listening and learning without judgment. So I love that. So I'm going to do one more question and then we will let everyone go eat dinner and say goodnight. Oh, actually I wanted to say, well, it doesn't matter now, but I did want to say one other thing about something that Ansley said. I was just surprised that youth still say that's so gay. I thought that was so 90s. Thought we were done with that, but I guess not. And also to what Morgan said about not assuming anything about someone because, or you've all really said this, not assuming anything about anyone because they're gay, because they're pansexual, because they're trans, you know, learning about that person as an individual. If it's your child, asking them questions as an individual out of curiosity and not out of judgment, and yeah, being there for them. So let's see, one more question. I'm trying to make sure, did I answer any of these? Oh, I just saved the Google Doc as a PDF. I'll put it in there now. I was like, I cannot forget this document exists. I'm saving it as a PDF right now. I hope that works for you, Slevin. I don't know how to say that. So someone asked this question for Heather, and other people can answer it as well. As a former educator, how can educators be more supportive of their students who identify as LGBTQ+?
That's a really great question, and it's something that I really strive to share with other teachers and educators at my building. Simple things like putting an HRC sticker on your door, or a safe space sticker, HRC Human Rights Campaign, or a safe space sticker, being part of the GLSEN, it's an educational network. Using proper pronouns, and that's not just for this community. That is for everybody. And I think that starting off, it's something you could do that's so simple. But I'll tell you what, it makes a landslide of difference when you allow the autonomy for these children to identify with their own pronouns and how they would like to be addressed in your classroom. And the last thing I guess I'm going to say is kind of piggybacking off of what Ainsley said, is that always address those slang things that are being said. And it's not about reprimanding, it's about educating. Maybe we could say it a different way. Providing them a different opportunity, because most times when they say, oh, that's so gay, it's not meant to be malicious, but it is something, it can be sensitive to people who identify. So just always being that person to support and redirect and educate goes a long way. And I think the last thing I'm going to say, I know I said that already, was being a resource for other teachers and being willing to talk to other teachers, teenagers talking to teachers. As a teen, even in middle school, that's such a huge time where teenagers still like their teachers in middle school, believe it or not. That's one thing I do miss about being in middle school. And having that conversation, and hopefully there are some people that are safe spaces in each school that there are, that their children in, because it's really important. And I can't stress this enough, talk to the board, be a vocal, be an ally, communicate, educate, fight for your children.
Yes, this was lovely. Any last words, any of my beautiful panelists?
I just want to say thank you for having me, and I'm glad we got to talk about all these subjects and topics, and the questions were really great. Really glad we have a lot of questions.
I would also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Morgan.
Oh, sorry. Lastly, just give yourself the time and the space to evolve as a parent, as an LGBTQ. It's just, life is not on one set path. So if pronouns change, if sexual identities change, it's okay. Nobody has to be set in their identity, because life is a forever evolving thing. So should people be forever evolving. So, and thank you guys for allowing me to speak.
Oh my God, that was so beautiful. I think that the other thing that I would just say is thank you to everyone who took time out of their busy lives to be here and to show up for LGBTQ young people in this way. As a person who's a fully grown adult, but with family who is not supportive, it is really, truly wonderful that you're here. So just thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yay, this was so lovely. I loved hearing from everybody. Again, I'm so sorry about the chat, everyone, but since I figured it out the last 10 minutes, we will have that up and ready for you next Monday at 7 o'clock on the dot. And please take that short survey before you leave, so that we can do better in round 2 or part 2, and also so we can see what you liked, what you didn't like, all that good stuff. And we are so glad you all came, and I hope you have a beautiful, lovely night. And take this information you shared with you to your friends, family, and communities. Bye, everyone.